Hey, hello once again, and thanks for taking the time to sit through and watch another episode of the Jupiter 2 model build. So moving on with the build here, I'm going to be working on the base, and what I've got here is this 20 inch by 20 inch birchwood canvas for painting. I found this by accident and thought it would be great to use for a base for this. You notice it has a nice frame around the underside. Nice thick wood. I'll have to drill through to put some buttons in here to control the model. But it's got a lot of empty space in there for me to put all of my electronics and wiring. Power in the back. I'll run into all the electronics here. And then along the front edge I'll put buttons to control the different things. So I've gone and I've painted the outer edge just a flat black. As you can see here, I've got flat black all the way around, and I've gone over into the top a little bit. And I bought a roll of this carbon fiber paper. I thought it was kind of cool looking, and I thought it might look nice along the edges, kind of a little more futuristic looking rather than just black. So I've gone and it's self-adhesive, and I've gone all around the edges, but I've also stapled it down on the underside and top side just to hold it nice and taut against the edges to keep it from peeling up. So I've gone, and the first thing I've done is I've drilled out a hole here for my power plug so that I can plug the unit in, and you can see here I've drilled a hole all the way through for the power plug connector to go inside. And I'm going to go ahead and run my positive and ground wires through here, which are pre-soldered, or which I had pre-soldered onto the connector, and I'm just going to push it in there, and it's nice and tight, and I'll seal it in on the back side with a little bit of hot glue as well. So here we have the buttons I will be using to control the various things of the model, and you can see how small they are compared to the thickness of this wood frame here. They're much too small just to drill holes and stick them in there. So my plan for this is a piece of 0.75 millimeter styrene painted black. I'll drill holes out, attach the buttons to that, then I'll make large holes through the wood to have plenty of clearance for wires to be connected to the backside, and I'll just glue this strip to the front, and it also gives it a little bit of different texture. So I've gone and I've marked off my styrene strip here of how often I'd like the holes to be drilled out, which is every 1.5 inches. And I've gone and I've drilled them out with a 9/32 inch drill bit, and you can see that's the right size for the button caps that I'm using for the buttons here. And all of them will have a button cap attached to the end, so they'll all be the same diameter. I've also marked on the outside here exactly where the strip will go to center it up on the wood, and this will give me a marking through all these holes of where to drill into the wood. So I'm just going to mark those down the line here. So I've gone and I've marked through the holes into the wood with a silver Sharpie, and now I've gone through and drilled out with a 1/2 inch drill bit large holes for the buttons to go through. And I've gone and I've glued some styrene to the edges of each button. As you can see, there's glue there, and it just goes over the edge of the button caps so that I can put the piece of styrene flush up against my styrene sheet, and it gives the button room to be pushed in. And then I'll just hot glue it to the edge of the styrene strip. Now I've gone on and I've soldered all the wires to my various buttons here. And then I'm going to stick them through the holes of my styrene strip. So I've gone now and I have hot glued all of the buttons into position. You can see here how sturdy they are, and I can push the buttons and they work just fine. So now I'm going to take the wires from each of the buttons and feed them through into the 1/2 inch holes in the wooden base and just get all those fed through and glue down the styrene strip to the front edge of the base. And I've got all my wires run in here, and I'm just going to carefully push this into place, and all the buttons are clearing through those 1/2-inch holes, and there we have the strip down on the front of the base. And then I'll just glue it down around the edges as well. And here it is completed. All the buttons are working just fine. And I have my turn knob here to adjust the speed of the wall beam pulsating. So we've got all the wires run through, buttons secured, so I can put all the electronics in the center here. Next up, I've gone and I've marked on the top side where the foot pads of the saucer go, and in the back one I drilled a hole here for the wires to go through with these connectors so that I can connect the buttons to the model itself. And here I'm going to take the positive and ground wires from my power connector to this PCB board, and then that will go out to the electronics. And I've gone and I've soldered those 2 wires into position here for this board to be my power board. And I have something new I'm trying here, which is an RF receiver. And I'm going to try to make some of the controls work remotely with a little 4-button key fob in this wireless receiver. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to feed my positive and ground wires to the board I have here. So here I have my positive and ground wires coming from the power source to the power buttons. Here I have ground from the power source going to my buttons, and then they are going to this little board here, which will go off to control the various functions. And this is going to split off and then go to the back hole to go to the model, and also go to this RF receiver. And they'll be going to a soundboard as well. And these wires over here will be going up through the hole into the model as well. And then these 2 wires will be going up through the model, which control the wall beam pulsating. So this is the Adafruit soundboard. I have multiple sounds in here. When things are activated, there will be some sounds. I've had to do a little change up here with the inside because I realized everything was powering at once. So I've now run the main power line directly to my power button, and then that button runs off to this board up here to go to the model and feeds the other board here to power everything else up. And then I have a little buck converter here for 5 volts for my RF receiver and the soundboard, because they both require 5 volts and everything else is being fed 9 volts. And these buttons up here all go to this board, and then they branch off to the various activating pins of the soundboard, and the RF receiver goes to the same board to activate the same pins on the audio board. And again, these wires go to this little board up here. This is the Fusion Core power button, which goes all up here, and they all feed through these little pigtail connectors, which will go into the model once it's set on top of the base. So here we have the wires from the model itself connected to the little pigtails coming out of the base, and then you'll just push the wires back through the hole inside the base, set the model down. Then we take the power plug, plug it into the back of the base, and we have our main power here, and you can see the little landing gear lights came on. And here we have the Fusion Core power button, which turns on the Fusion Core and activates it, and we do have some sound there as well being activated. And then we have this button here, which will change the speed of the Fusion Core, and that seems to be working just fine. I have gone through and tested the rest of the buttons as well with the interior of the ship, but I'm not going to be showing that at this point. That'll be for later. I also have this piece of black foam core, which I've cut down as the bottom of the base. I put these little rubber feet on the 4 corners, And then I've also taken some magnets in 4 positions and attached them to the base as well as the foam core, so that I can then take this foam core and it will snap down right in place and conceal everything inside the base and protect it. And then I can also flip the base over, set it down on a tabletop, and you get your 4 rubber feet protecting your tabletop. So you just flip that back over and you can grab the foam core and pop it right out of there and get back inside and working on the electronics. A little update here. Because this RF receiver is new to me and I've never used one, I just learned that this guy outputs high voltage out of these pins and the soundboard requires low voltage. So little research, went online, and I picked up this 74HC04 chip which inverts polarity of power, so I can go in and out with reversed voltage. So the output of these pins will go out with high voltage. This will convert it to low voltage out to the input pins of the soundboard to activate sounds. So with all the electronics done, it's time to move on. So for the top of the base here, I have this big piece of foam which I've had sitting in my garage, and I'm going to cut some out and I'm just going to make some rock formations to put around the top side of the base. So I'm going to start out here with making a bunch of rocks. Got some medium-sized ones, a large one in the back, and a bunch of little chunks here that I'll sort through and figure out what I want to use out of all these pieces that I've ripped out. So I've got like this one big chunk here, and you'll notice that the foam, it has those little like round beads, but this big chunk here, what I've done is I've used a heat gun and it melts the surface of it and gives it a little bit of a different texture so it doesn't look just like round beads. So here's one I haven't done yet, and you can see I just take the heat gun and heat it up, and you can see how it melts it a little bit, gives a little bit different texture, makes it look a little more organic, and I just think it looks a little more kind of like a lava rock type of rock, actually, is what I think it looks like. You'll notice this piece of foam has a hole cut out here for a speaker, and I also had these little foot nylon pieces here, and I've gone and I've cut out a little chunk of nylon, and I'm going to stretch that over the hole and basically make a speaker cabinet out of this piece of foam rock is my intention. So I'll just glue that into position and then I'll paint the entire thing. So I've gone and I've glued it. I've also put glue around in various areas just to make some smooth areas, make a little bit of different texture around the rock, and I've glued down the edges of this nylon all around. Then I put a speaker in here temporarily with the little pigtail that will plug into the base here. Then I put some magnets on the underside of the foam, and I have 2 magnets in the base to hold the rock down. Then I'll just take the plugs here, plug them together, and then, like the model itself, just push the wire back down through the hole, and then the rock will just snap into position and attach with the magnets, and it'll hold it in place, and then you've got your speaker in there which will play the sounds and come through the nylon fabric in the top of the rock. And the magnet system works pretty well. It holds that down in place, keeps it in the right position all the time, so I won't have to glue it, and if need be, the speaker could be changed out. So I've got all of my rocks painted now with some Tamiya fine gray primer. And then I'm going to move on, and I'm going to start off by painting all of them with the Vallejo chocolate brown. And I'm just going to cover them completely with the chocolate brown, all the different various rocks. Then I'm going to go over them in some of the highlight areas with a little bit lighter beige brown by Vallejo, and just do some of the raised areas and make a little bit of depth and texture. and then even go over with another coat of khaki, a little bit lighter brown with a different shade of brown, again to add some more texture and depth to the rock. And then I have some Tamiya deck tan to make them look kind of dusty. And then I'm going to take some Tamiya pastels. I have some sand, and I'm just going to lightly brush over some of the pieces here and pick up some of the highlights. And you can see there's a lot of texture and depth to these rocks here. And here I have all of my rocks completed and painted. I like the way they turned out. They're similar to lava rocks, but you know, the color is a little bit different. I think it's going to look really nice when they're spread out on top of the base, which I will then cover with a bunch of sand. So we've got the top here. I put these little square pieces that match the feet, landing gear feet, so that I can put some sand up against the edge but leave it open. I've also outlined where my front speaker rocks go, because I don't want to put sand underneath those. And what I've done is I've gone around these pads for the landing gear with a little bit of hot glue to raise it up so that when the feet are placed in, the sand will go up against it and it'll raise it up. So I'm just going to start pouring Elmer's glue all over the base here, starting in the front. And basically I just smear the Elmer's glue around until it gets all covered. And then I just start pouring sand over the top of the glue, and the sand sticks to the glue. And you can see here where the one speaker goes. There's a mark there. And here's the area for the landing gear pad. It'll sit inside there, and the sand looks like it's brushed up, blown up against the landing gear. This area here is kind of a blown sand ripple look. That was when the glue was still wet, tipping the base up and kind of tapping it, and the glue would run down, making that ripple effect, which I really like. And I've done some other layer building up around here, some more ripple effect to make it look like a sand blown, different levels. So I'm going to airbrush here with some Vallejo beige brown. And I'm just going to start going over some areas just to kind of highlight and add some depth, as you can see here, all over the base. The center here is where the fusion core of the ship is and blasts out. So I want to darken that up just a tad, and I'm going to use some German gray from Vallejo just to add a little darkness to the area, like the fusion core engine has scorched the ground a little bit. And here we have it painted. I'm going to add the rocks in here, and we'll take a look and see how it's looking. And I like the way this has turned out. The rocks turned out really good. I like the shading of the sand. It adds some dimension and depth to the sand. I like the ripple effect, kind of like wind-blown sand. And there we have the completed base, electronics and all. And here's just a little sneak of what it'll look like with the Jupiter 2 on it. So that's it for this video. The base is done. Next video we'll finish up building the Jupiter 2, and then that'll be it. So thanks for watching. Hey, if you like watching my videos, please feel free to give them a like. And so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, click subscribe.